Hello, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and we have episode two of Gary Pacelli's story. It's an amazing story that we all need to hear, and it'll definitely help people. And so we're continuing his journey from his accident with skydiving and all of the different things that are going through his mind and that he's having to deal with. So, welcome back, Gary. We're so excited to hear the finishing of your journey.
Great. I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
So, right now we're going to start with your recovery part.
Okay. So now I was in North Carolina and I live in upstate New York. So my wife's a third grade teacher and I still had two kids in high school. So I didn't want her coming down. And I actually I refused to FaceTime her because I didn't want her to see me because, I was telling her that, no, I'm okay. I'm going to be fine. You know, and meanwhile, my hands are curled in and, I can't move and I look horrible, and it wasn't because I didn't believe what I was saying. It's just that I didn't know how I was going to pull it off. And so I wouldn't FaceTime her. And so she ended up calling the head nurse and I got in big trouble. So, so I started FaceTiming her, but I had a decision to make. Do I go home for therapy or do I stay in North Carolina? So the hospital I was in was it was a fantastic hospital, and they were well known for their physical therapy. People from all over the country go there just for this reason. They specialized in traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. So I was in good hands. I knew that, but I was still far away from my family. So I had to make a decision. Do I go to New York or do I stay in North Carolina? So, my wife being a teacher, she couldn't just drop everything and come see me because, again, we had two kids and she had a job. So, I decided to stay in North Carolina because I knew how important this was, that I only had one shot to walk out of that hospital. And, I couldn't blow it. So I just needed total concentration. You know, I just had to give this thing every single thing I had. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if I couldn't walk because I didn't give it everything I had. So to me, every single day I woke up, it was like the first day. I just hit it that hard. It was like, I was going to walk out of that hospital or I was going to die trying. There was no in between, right? So that's how I hit it, and you know, it was going great. They really took a liking to me because I motivated them, they motivated me, right? So, it was just a great uh, give and take, right? I would try anything. I had complete trust in them too, though, and that's important, right? Because if you don't trust people that you're working with, you're not going to be so willing to try things because when you're in a hospital like that and you can't really, uh, you don't have any control. You don't want to get hurt anymore. You don't want someone to drop you who's supposed to be there behind you. So it's just you have to have that trust, and I had that trust. I had total complete trust, and things were going really really good. And you know the problem is though, I don't know if I said this already though, but there's no such thing as rock bottom, right? It's just a bottomless pit, right? There's no point that you can get to where you say, "Oh, okay, that was the last bad thing that's going to happen to me. Now, from now on, everything's going to be," there just isn't. And that wolf is always at the door, always. and let your guard down for a second, and boom, he'll get you, right? So I was very grateful to be where I was. I was very motivated, but I was also very humble, you know, because I knew that as bad of a situation that I was in, it could be worse, you know. At least I have a little hope, tiny bit, but at least I have that, right? And that means everything. So I, and people think too though when you're paralyzed and you can't move, um, and then all of a sudden, you can move, right? They think it's like that, right? They think you just woke up one day and you were like, all right, doesn't work that way. It does. You have to fight and scrape for every single inch. There's nothing is given to you, nothing. Um, and there's no waking up one day and wow, everything's back to normal. It just doesn't work that way. So the the first day that I had to go to physical therapy, I had never been in a wheelchair before. Whenever they needed to take me from one bed to another, they put me in this little, I call it the net. Like they come and they lay this big tarp down and they roll you over on it, and and then they hook it up. It looks like an engine lift. Some of that would be in a mechanic's garage, right? And they just lift you up and they move the bed and they put another bed underneath you and they wheel you away, right? And so when I had to get into that wheelchair the first time, it took like three people, right? And I'm giving it every single ounce of energy that I have. I'm dead weight, right? And I can't do anything, and I got in a wheelchair and he got me over to therapy. And again, they had to put me onto this table, so one of those therapy tables that goes up and down, right? So I get on, I'm on the table now, and so I'm trying to move, and I can't move. I mean, there's nothing that I can do, nothing. So to me, it's hopeless, right? It's I have hope, but I can't see where this is going, because if I move my leg like a millimeter, right? That's like a big, like party almost. Hooray, you did it. I'm like, I did nothing. To me, like that's where you have to start though, right? And I learned quickly though that there's no big wins. It's just one tiny small victory on top of another one on top of another one, and it builds up, and you just keep going. And then one day you realize that, hey, you know what? I can actually like slide my legs off the side of the bed. Like wow, that's a big deal. Like it's not. You're using momentum and everything, but like that's improvement. You can see that is absolutely improvement. So you go through all these things, and just trying to get up, right? You know, it's just grueling. I guess that's what I'm trying to get across. It's like it's just grueling, and it's intense, and it's all you. It's all you. No one can help you, right? So I'm going through this, and I'm making progress. Uh, you know, to me, like, okay, I think I'm doing pretty well. Things are going okay. I can see that if I keep going, that I'm going to get there. I'll get there, right? Uh, so I go back to my room for lunch one day, and I asked the nurse to dial my wife, Kristen, her phone number, because I can't hold my phone. I can't dial anything. So she gets on the phone, and I could tell that she'd been crying, and and we've been married a long time, so you can tell. So I ask her what's wrong. She doesn't want to tell me because I understand, because I'm in enough, I got enough going on, right? So she finally comes out. She tells me that one of my dogs had died. Right? I had two dogs. I had a Malamute, an Alaskan Malamute, and a Golden Retriever. My Golden Retriever just died, just suddenly. Nothing wrong with her. Walked in the room. 'Cause this is during COVID too. So my wife had to teach from home, right? So she was Zooming her class and she dismissed them for lunch. And dog just walked in the room and died. So now this just happened, right? Because this probably happened at 12 o'clock. I'm calling her at 1 o'clock. Um, so, she tells me that, my dog had died, right? Now, I was floored, right? Like, it devastated me. Like, I mean, really, like, it just, all that, all those wins that I had stacked up, all that hope, right? And it just wiped it away like it was gone, man. And that's like I learned that hope is fleeting. It's like it's really fickle. It could be gone like that. And but faith though is solid, right? Faith is like immovable, right? It doesn't go away. You know. So I was sitting there in my wheelchair and I'm staring at the wall and I just wanted to just throw in the towel. And I was done. Like it just ripped my heart out. I was finished. And I was going to tell my wife to put me in a nursing home, right? Just put me in a nursing home. Just wheel me in, right? Close the door. Make believe I was dead. This way I don't want it done, you know? And I started to think, about everything. And I started to pray, like, I'm just praying for the strength just to get back in the fight, man, just to shake this off so I can get back in the fight. I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm not asking for, you know, just want to be able to get back to the fight. And and it's funny what you pray for and what you get. You don't think you get it, but you get it in a different way, you know? Like, so I prayed for the strength to get back into the fight, and here I am in my mind picturing like a boxer going into the ring, right? They announce it. I didn't get that, you know, but what I did get was a life lesson, really. I remembered when I was a police academy drill instructor. That's what I got. I got a memory when I was a police academy drill instructor, and all the police recruits that I had trained. Okay, there must be hundreds of them, right? You know, uh, and I was good at my job. I didn't necessarily like it because it's not really my personality and it's all an act, but I was good at it. I was because of the Marine Corps. I had been through a corrections officer academy and the police officers academy, so I was in very good shape, and so I came with my uniform on, and I was, you know, you would swear I was like 6'4" if I was yelling at you. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, um, but again, it was for a purpose, though. It wasn't for fun. It wasn't. It was just because I had to teach these recruits, right? Um, like, I wasn't up to. It wasn't up to me who got hired, right? So sometimes you get some of these recruits come to you and they've never been yelled at before in their life. They're still living at home. Their mother's making their beds. They would go off to work, and the mother would hand them a brown paper bag with their lunch in it. Like they really, not all of them obviously, but some of them. So it wasn't up to me who got hired. It wasn't my, uh, you know, it was up to me to get them ready to get on the street, right? Because on the street, they don't care if you have a badge. They don't care, you know. So you have to be prepared, right? My job was to teach these recruits how to reach down deep, deep inside themselves and to find the will to survive, right? And to never quit, ever, because they can't, because help's not coming. You're on your own. You know what I mean? You are the help, right?
Mhm.
So there's no running away. Like, this is it, and And it's not for everybody. It's not, fortunately. Um, but it's better to find that out in the academy than on the street. When it's on the street, people get hurt. People get killed, and it's for real. So that was my job, right? And so I realized that, realized at that point that, you know, dying is easy, right? Living is hard, okay? Um, so and at that point, I realized that I became two things though that I despise: a victim and a hypocrite, right? Because I spent all that time screaming at them, never quit, ever. You can't quit, you can't quit. And here I am feeling like a victim, feeling sorry for myself, about to quit. So I remembered who I was, and then more importantly, I remembered whom I was fighting for, right? Because I wasn't alone. It wasn't just I didn't have that the choice were to say put me in a nursing home and close the door. It wasn't that simple. It wasn't just me I had to worry about. So in a way, I got exactly what I had prayed for. I just didn't get it in the form that I wanted it. But I got exactly what I needed, right? And I decided to go back to therapy, and I told them I asked for more pain and more suffering, and because the quicker that I put the pain and the suffering in and put the hard work in, then I could go home, right? But I could go home not in that wheelchair, but on my feet, you know. So uh, yeah, and I realize though, like as human beings, though, we sell ourselves short, right? We underestimate our ability to persevere in extreme hardship, right? Like we think that, like we can't take it, right? Of course we can, you know. Um, you know, we're not even close to that point, where we can take so much more, and chances are that you're going to get so much more, and you have to just realize that you can take it, you can do it, and we all sometimes we forget, even people that are highly trained, like myself, I forgot, and but when you remember that, you know, well, then you're in it. You're in it, and you're gonna win. That's when you're gonna win, because now I know I can take it. I this is it's hard, but it's really nothing. You just go, you put your head down, and you go for it. And that's where I came back. I came back from that, and I learned something so valuable, uh, that because I believe now that, like, what I learned was that, like, every single hardship that is thrown at you, or you feel just rained down on you, it's all to, I want to say, toughen you up. But when you come out the other side, and you will, and we always do, you're that much stronger, right? And you're that much, you know, whether it's you learn how to be humble, or you learn that you have the ability, you have what you need to keep going forward, right? I think maybe that's a lot of it. Um, so I think that when we pray and whatever, we get what we ask for. It just isn't always necessarily how we would like it, because we would like it very simple and very, very easy. And I prayed to walk out of that hospital, and I did, but it's not the way I wanted it. I wanted to wake up and say, "Oh man, I'm back to normal." Right? No, I'm not back to normal. And I realized also that the accident, it took so much for me, man. It really took so much, but it actually has given me, like, way more than it has taken. You know, and obviously, I wish it never happened, of course. But I would be a fool though not to, like, accept the gifts that I've been given, um, and to try to turn the bad into good. You know, that's even why I'm here talking about it, because if I could help somebody else who thinks, instead of screaming at them like a drill instructor, I don't have to do that anymore. I mean, unless they want me to, but I really don't want to do that. I learned that, it's one thing to scream at people, and but it's another thing to now have to take your own medicine, really, right? And to see, you know, and you know, because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. That's the last thing in the world I ever wanted to be. So I went back to therapy, and you know, but it was frustrating too, though, to see other people who uh, just gave up. They just gave up, and and I was so close to that, right? I wanted to give up, but they actually did it, and they crossed over that line. They crossed that bridge, and there was no coming back in their mind anyway, because there was a way to come back. They could have snapped right at it. But there's nothing that you could say to them to get them to change their mind, right? And it's a terrible place to be, you know, and it's unnecessary. And I guess that's what my point is. I wish I could try to get that point across to people that it's not necessary. You don't have to give up. You can take it. You can, whatever you're going through, take it. And I'm not saying alone, there's help. Talk to people, right? There's always somebody, right? There's always something that'll get you through the day, just to get you through over that hump, you know? And, I was alone and I wanted it that way though, because I didn't want any distractions really, you know? And because I wanted to be able to have these tough moments and not have to worry about, my family seeing me like that or whatever. So, but that's me, that worked for me. Whatever it takes for you to get over that hump, you know. And I also learned so I knew that the task was enormous, when the doctor said that it was up to me, right? And again, I talk about how it's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One
Mhm.
bite at a time. But it's not that easy. Things don't come that easy, one bite at a time. Because, that saying doesn't tell you that the first bite of the elephant is the most disgusting thing that you've ever tasted. You know, it's 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 horrible, you know, and but you got to take the bite, right? And you got to start eating the elephant. That's how you get to the other side. And as time progresses, you learn to tolerate it. Then you actually like it. Then when you'll actually learn to love it, whatever it is that and when you get to that point, you're gonna win. That's the point you want to be in. And I got to that point where I loved it. I couldn't get enough, man. And they were doing things to me like they were experimenting on me, like the therapist, they were hooking me up to the electrodes and they were trying to get my muscles to move like without me doing anything. And, you know, but they were motivated. I was motivated. And I did walk out of the hospital, right? And it was after 2 months though of hell. Like there wasn't a minute of it that wasn't hell, you know? Um, every step, every single thing, you had to earn it. You really had to earn it. And when I walked out of the hospital, I thought I was ready. And I wasn't, man, because the world is so much bigger and so much faster, right? And then now you're out in the world, and you know, um, realize you have so much further to go, and you're like, oh man, I got to start all over again. And you do, because things are quite quicker, and the world's bigger. I found a place for therapy. We same routine. We hit it really hard. You know, but I was in really bad shape. Like I was totally numb, right? It could stab me. Like I wouldn't even feel it. Um, I was stiff. My whole right side was locked up. It was locked. Uh, I had no feeling in my hands. Very like my fingers were, like very weak. If I was holding something and I looked away, it would fall right out. I broke so many glasses at my house because they just fell out. So, but you know what? I was getting better, little every single day. Like every day we'd hit it and I get a little better. Like those small victories, though, right? And you just keep getting them, yeah. And after a couple months, I made good improvement. Um, you know, but there's a mental aspect to all of this too, though, right? Because you're dealing with the pain, which is incredible, right? Um, but that's not even like the worst part. I think it's more of the like the what happens with your brain.
Mm.
So to me, like I suddenly became very claustrophobic. Uh, so when my hands and feet would hurt, get really bad at night, it would bring me back to being in the hospital when I was totally paralyzed, right? And it would be like, like my mind would be like, oh man, like because that's kind of like being, uh, it's kind of like not being able to move. Or if when you can't feel your hands or your feet, it brings it, like it's I can't explain it, but it brought me right back to laying in that hospital, not being able to move. And my wife got me through some really really bad nights. And yeah, I don't know I mean. I don't know really what I would have done without her because I had some really, like wake up screaming in the middle of the night about something. Um, so around like this point, I decided, I got to get back. I need to. I can't have this accident define me for the rest of my life. I just can't, you know, because I don't want to be that guy where when people see me, it's like, oh yeah, that's that guy who got messed up skydiving. You know, so I knew that I had to get back up in the air, right? And um, it wasn't a very popular idea, I have to say, right? People were totally against it. And I didn't really understand. I understood the non skydiving community being like, are you crazy? You're out of your mind, you know? So I didn't really like tell them that. But after like 2 months of being out of the hospital, I went to the skydiving center by my house, my home drop zone, right? Where all my friends were. And so I went there. And to my surprise, honestly, like they weren't very happy to see me. Uh, some of them decided that like I would never skydive again. Some of them decided like that they just didn't want nothing to do with me. They totally turned their backs on me, right? And all of them were very, very uncomfortable around me. And that's another thing I learned too, though, that and I'm sure that I was guilty of it before I got hurt, right?
Mhm.
That people with disabilities make other people uncomfortable for whatever reason, and it's ridiculous. But I didn't realize that until I'm the one in the wheelchair, and nobody sees me. No one sees me. Like all of a sudden, like I'm over here. I'm right here. No, people just make believe they don't see it, and which is that's insane. You know, I at the drop zone, I didn't understand it then. I understood it later. Why everybody was uncomfortable, really didn't want me around. Because they didn't want to see me like hunched over and limping right before they got on an airplane uh, and to go jump.
Mhm.
I can understand that, right? I get it. I get it now. I didn't get it then. So it's, I say like, I got hurt. I didn't get stupid. You know what I mean? You know, People talk to me totally different. They talk to me like I had never, skydived. I've never, like there were people, like there were students that were talking to me like you like I was, some kind of like moron, and I'm like, I got almost 500 jumps. What do you talk? You know what I mean? Like, I kept my mouth shut, but I kept my mouth shut because I wanted to get somebody to help me back up in the air. So I was being good. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But um, I couldn't find anybody that would help me. Right? I couldn't even find my gear. Like all my skydiving gear went missing. Right? It didn't go missing. They hit it on me. You know? What am I, like a teenager that stayed out too late? You're going
Mhm.
to take my car keys away? Like that's ridiculous. I mean, if I really wanted to skydive, I'll skydive. I would go somewhere else that they didn't know me and rent. You know what I mean? Like, uh, and in their mind, they're doing the right thing. But they're not. They're not doing the right thing. Because I'm not a child, right? So it's getting frustrated. I was getting very frustrated, and I asked a tandem instructor if he would take me on a tandem skydive. And a tandem skydive is when you attach yourself to, to the instructor, right? It's the instructor and the student, whoever, and they jump out together. Okay, so where's the harm in that, right? Like the drop zone manager got involved. She stepped in. She flipped out. She starts yelling at me. Like, are you crazy, Gary? You're never jumping again, ever. You can ride the plane, but that's it.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting there like wow, like this is not exactly what I wanted to hear, right? Because you know I see veterans jumping, right, and some of these guys are missing limbs, and they modify their gear and they train, and they get it done, and it's incredibly motivating, right? And I couldn't even get anyone to discuss the possibility, and this isn't about skydiving, but in a way it is because this is anything in life, really. So I want to explain though why I need the skydive. It wasn't because I was looking for attention or I wanted to be a hero. Say, "Oh, look at me, I'm skydiving, right?" Not at all. It was that you know I knew that I would have limitations that I would have to deal with the rest of my life. I knew that, and I was okay with that. And and if I could do something though that I love to do, right, something that I'm trained to do, skydiving,
Yeah.
and I can do it safely, well, then I don't have to be a victim and feel sorry for myself, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And, it's especially like on those mornings that when I wake up and every single thing hurts me, right? I
Mhm.
can very easily sit there and say, everything hurts. I'm just going to lay in bed all day. Nobody would fault me for that, right? But, you can skydive, right? You can jump out of a plane 2 miles high. Okay, well, get out of bed, get dressed, stop feeling sorry for yourself, stop being a victim, and go get it done, right? So I needed the ability to get rid of any chance of having an excuse, right? An excuse to be a victim, right? So that's why I needed to skydive. That was my thought process. But other people didn't see it that way, right? They just they passed their judgment, they made the decision, and there's nothing you could say. They didn't want to hear it. Uh, no, nobody would work with me because of the stigma of breaking your neck, right? Which is ridiculous. So, um, and I started to feel like I did something wrong. That's the thing. Like I almost started to feel like, well, but then I said, wait a second, I didn't do anything wrong. You know, they're just they're wrong. You know, uh, because like plenty of times, people in wheelchairs would come to the drop zone and want to go on a tandem skydive,
Mhm.
and it was no problem. Like they would hook up with the instructor or take them on a plane, they would do it. So why is it different for me, right?
Yeah.
Because of the neck thing. Oh, you can't touch it. You're gonna, that's ridiculous. So I was starting to get frustrated, and and I told you how my wife got me through those terrible nights. And the other person that helped me was my, my friend Shauna, right? She took the chance on me that when no one else would take a chance on me, right? I called her up. She was the drop zone manager at Skydive Shenandoah in New Market, Virginia. And I called her up and I unloaded. Not on her, but in general. I told her how like nobody would help me, couldn't get anyone to help me get my way back up in the sky. And I told her I couldn't find my gear. So she explained to me that she had my gear, right? And she was fixing it, but she needed more time because it was like in really bad shape because of my accident. Okay, I understand that. But then she said that okay, and she asked me, well, do you want to skydive? I'm like, yeah, yeah, I want to skydive, So she's like, all right, go get a doctor's note. Go get a note from your doctor clearing you and come down to Virginia in 4 weeks and I'll take you. Okay. So I called my doctor in North Carolina. I had that note in an hour, you know. He was such a great, just a great doctor, but and a great human being, man. Because like, you know, he totally supported me. Uh, go back to skydive. He was all for it. He said, "You want to skydive? Okay, work hard enough to be able to skydive." You know, and he had told me that when I left the hospital. So when I called him for the note, boom, he sent it right out. So I had it within an hour, but I couldn't tell anyone because the skydiving center in Virginia was owned by the same person that owned the one up here by my house. And but he wasn't the problem. It was his manager that was the problem. But I still didn't want to say anything to anybody. I didn't want anybody to get involved because that they think they're doing the right thing, and I didn't want anybody stopping the jump because you know uh, they think they're helping you. Everybody thinks that they know what's best for you, right? And they don't listen to you. Again, they don't. They you because whatever you have your disability, or your limp, and you're not like them. Whatever, they just don't listen to you. They don't hear you. I don't understand it. And so I didn't say a word. And I got down to Virginia 4 weeks later. I had made a lot of improvement, but I was still. It was questionable of whether you know someone was going to let me try to skydive. Uh, I had very little feeling in my hands. My fingers were so weak that I couldn't even button shirts or my pants. I couldn't tie my shoes yet. I had elastic shoelaces. I had to wear my phone on a string around my neck because I kept dropping it. And so I had my phone. It was really pretty cool because you didn't have to hold the phone anymore. Just press the button, you could talk. But it was. I still couldn't even hold a fork. I didn't know how to hold a fork yet. Like that's one of the hardest things. Uh, how do you tell somebody how to hold a fork, right? These are the little things that we do that we don't really know how we do them. It just we learn them so young that no one could tell me how I'm supposed to hold a fork, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how. Yeah. So and it's things like that, like tying your shoes. Like I had to do what I did for my kids when I was teaching them how to tie their shoe. I nailed the shoelace to a block of wood, to practice, right? I had to do that. I had to practice tie my shoes. So here I am, and I have these things wrong with me, and that didn't bother me because I knew that I could skydive because I had done that jump 1,000 times, laying there in that hospital bed in my mind, right? So I had gone over every single second of that jump. So I was ready to go. But the thing though is like everybody was mad at me. You know, everybody was mad at my wife. Wow, how could you let him skydive? What's wrong with you? Like I, I I lost so many friends over this, which I still to this day don't understand it. You know, And they wanted, I refused to get into the box that
Mhm.
they wanted to put me in, right? They
Mm.
wanted me in that box where I was a victim, felt sorry for myself. They didn't even want me to try, right? And by me returning to the sport of skydiving after my accident, right? It like forced them to have to take a really hard look at themselves. And I don't think they liked what they saw, you know? And that's on them, you know? I refused to listen. I wouldn't let anybody get in my way because this was so important to me. And it wasn't about skydiving. It had nothing to do with skydiving. It had everything to do with how I was going to live the rest of my life. You know, had I not done that, would I don't know, would I sit around all day on the couch feeling sorry for myself because I can't do anything? You know, but I did that jump, right? And now there's nothing I can't do. I'm a little slower, I'm a little weaker,
Mm.
you know, but I can still do everything, and I think because it's that mindset of, I did that, I can do anything, which is kind of true. You know what I mean? Like, so, we got on the plane, and I was very nervous. I was nervous that Shauna had changed her mind. She's very prominent in the sport of skydiving, right? And I respect her tremendously. She she was a sergeant in the New Jersey State Police. She was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. You know, uh, now she's a pilot, a rigger. She owns Skydive Shenandoah now. So, I mean, she's like a rock in this sport. You know what I mean? Like, if she tells you something, you better listen. Not because she's right. That's why. And so, and again, like she told me, she said, look, if do anything unsafe, or if I just feel you're not ready, then I'm going to ground you for 6 months, no questions asked. I agreed to that, because like I don't want to jump if I'm not safe, you know. Um, and I knew she'd be fair. There was no agenda, right? And I just wanted a chance, I just wanted that chance, just a fair shot, but just like anybody else, And so she gave it to me, and just to put it in perspective, you know, I had to put my rig on, but I needed to put it on a chair and I had to slip one leg in and slip the other leg, because I couldn't just throw it over my shoulder like I used to do and put it on, and I couldn't even like tighten the buckles, my chest strap, my leg strap, because my fingers were so weak. So she had to actually like do all that, and I was thinking, man, there's no way she's gonna let me do this. But she did, and so got on a plane and very quiet, because we're all both in deep thought, because she's risking everything by taking me on this jump. Her job, her reputation, everything. And there's really nothing in it for her, you know. Just doing it because we're friends, you know. And it's huge, you know. And she doesn't even realize at the time that this what she's doing for me is setting the tone for the rest of my life, you know. So, she opened the door, I swung my legs out, and I just raised my hand to give her the signal. She was right behind me that, I'm gonna exit now, right? So I just leaned forward, nothing fancy here, I just leaned forward and fall out of the plane, and the wind hit me, puts me in a barrel roll, and then a flip, and I stopped fighting it. And I just relaxed. And I'm so stiff though, I just let the wind put me in a position that is stable for me, right? And I turn right, I turn left, and I don't see Shauna, but she's above me, she's watching, you know, and so she comes down and we link up, and we're both smiling from ear to ear, because this is really a big deal, right? Especially for me. This is a big deal, but it's a big deal for her too, because if something happens, it's over, you know. But it's a big deal for anybody who has any kind of like something wrong, right? Because it shows that they can do it. They can do this, right? And they should be allowed to, right? You shouldn't stop them, right? If they can prove to you that they can do it safely, let them do it, right? Because it may not mean much to the seasoned skydiver with 5,000 jumps, but to this person, it means the world, you know? So, I let her know that I'm getting ready to deploy my parachute, right? She flies around to my side and she stays there. Like she's like a flying ninja, man. Like she's all over the place, right? And she flies around to my side. This way, if my hands don't work and I can't grab my deployment handle, she can deploy my parachute for me, you know? And so like I have obviously trouble with my fingers, right? So way I don't have a picture. Um, so when you pull your parachute and your parachute opens, you have what's called risers, right? And the risers are what the strings are attached to, right? And on those risers is your toggles, they call them, which basically is just your handles, but it's material, right? It folds flat. So when your canopy opens and you go to grab your toggles, you have to wiggle your fingers into to open, right? Because they're laying flat. So what Shauna did was she took my toggles, like I don't know what kind of fabric it is though. It's like very strong, obviously. Uh, and she kind of pulled it up and she sewed it. So they're always open, right?
Mhm.
So when you pack your parachute, they're flat, but when your parachute opens, they boom. So for me, it was just like, I just stuck my hands right in them. They were open, very easy for me,
Oh,
And then we had done that prior because I told her about my problem with my hands. So so there's ways though, like the veterans, right? They modify their gear, you
right.
know, uh, and they do it, and so anything can be done, So I reach back and I deploy my canopy and it opens, but I have such a bad body position right now because I'm so stiff that I got line twists, right? So lines are all twisted up, and so I'm spinning, right? So which normally you would reach up, and you would be able to just undo them, like, and if you can't undo them, well, if it's really bad, you just get rid of your parachute, right?
Right.
And so I go to reach up and I can't. My shoulders are locked. I can't reach up there, So my only other option now is I have to scissor kick as hard as I can, right? In the opposite direction of the spin, stop the spin, and it reverses the spin. So now, hopefully, you reverse the spin enough where it spins you right out of your line twist, and then, wow, you have a perfect canopy above you. So I'm just giving it everything I have, because if this doesn't work, I have to chop away, got to cut away my canopy and let it go right to my reserve, which I don't want to do. But you know, either way, I can handle it. So I kick as hard as I can, and it opens up right, and I look and I have this perfect canopy above me, and I check my altimeter about 4,000 feet, and that's high. I got a lot of time now. I slide my leg straps down on my harness, so and it allows me to sit in my harness like a chair. Right, it's the greatest thing, because now you're just sitting there. You're not standing straight up. You're like, but I'm sitting there, and I have time. I have about 4 minutes probably, and I time to reflect on everything that's happened, and like if I could describe in a word how I felt, right? And it was the word would be gratitude, right? I am so grateful, right? For everything. You know what I mean? Like, because not only can I walk, I'm actually skydiving, right? Like that's unheard of. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I realized though things like I realized that every single thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life, good or bad, has prepared me to survive and recover from this accident, right? And you know, I realized that 5 months and 12 days earlier, I was laying in somebody's backyard in North Carolina, paralyzed, wishing I was dead, right? And you know, I yelled at the top of my lungs. I just yelled like, I'm alive, right? Because like I was alive. Like at that moment, I was so alive, the most alive that I had ever been, And that sounds weird because I have all these things that are still wrong, right? But I don't consider them wrong. It is what it is, so again, like, and I don't know how your audience feels, and if this isn't your thing, that's fine. But you know, I look back and I asked to be saved before I hit that fence, right? And I believe that I was, right? And and I asked myself why, right? Why? I don't go to church, right? I don't volunteer at the hospital, okay? So like, was I spared because like I have a specific task that I'm supposed to perform, right? Like I write in the book, I say like, save a cat out of a tree, or as I'm driving down the road, like see a house on fire, run in and save a family, right? Or is it something as simple as like saying like a kind word to a stranger on the street who's at their wits' end, right, and about to give up? I'll never know, you know. And we would all like to believe that we're here for some grand purpose, right? Like saving the family from the fire, right? Um, I'm starting to believe that we're here for, mostly for the very important, easy things, like saying hello to the stranger, right? And again, I write this in the book, and uh, if we spend all our time, right, looking up at the rooftops for signs of smoke of the house on fire, right, we miss all those opportunities on the ground to do the very important, easy things, And, in the Bible, angels appear several times as regular people, right? And I don't want to miss my angel because I'm looking up the rooftops, right, for signs of smoke, you know? And we tend to take all the little things that we do every single day for granted, right? Like putting your socks on, getting dressed, brushing your teeth, uh, tying your shoes, or even like holding a fork, right? Like all these little things. Who cares, right? But have those things taken away from you, and you will care. There is no doubt. I couldn't do any of those things. Those were the things, though, that I daydreamed about the most. It's not what you think you would daydream about, right? You know, but it's things like that, like being able to bend down and pick up a sock that you dropped or something, or even put like I said, put your socks on. You can't do it, It's hard. It's so you know, and when I was up there, like floating around, right, wondering where I was going to crash and most likely die, right? I never once thought, I'm really going to miss my car, or I wish I had more time to buy a bigger house or a nicer watch, right? That's all just stuff, man. Like, you know, at the end of your life, that stuff has absolutely no value. Okay. It just doesn't matter. And I decided that I'm going to build wealth and equity in my soul, right? And I'm going to do that by being good to people, everyone, even people that don't deserve it. It's not my problem. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I'm not going to allow people that are miserable or just want to be mean or nasty. I, I'm not going to change the way I act because of the way someone else acts. You know what I mean, right? If
Mhm.
somebody's nasty or mean to me, oh, okay, hey, listen, hope you have a better day. I move on. I'm not going to let that bother me and change the way I act. You know, but you have to decide that though, right? Like, so when I get out of bed in the morning, I put my feet on the ground every day. It's like a miracle, right? It's like, hey, it's a new day, right? I got my feet on the ground. Look at that, right? And you have to make a decision. You know, you have to choose to be happy. You can choose to be happy or you can choose to be miserable. It's
Right.
just a choice in either direction. Um, and it's listen, and I'm human. Don't get me wrong. I find myself sometimes getting off track, right? Getting pissed off at something that's out of my control, right? Or whatever. But you know what? Once I realize that, I just bring myself right back to where I want to be, and I just keep it in that little zone, like I write that, like can't change the past, right? But the past, it can change our future, obviously, right? We can let it drag us down like an anchor, or we can use it to guide us like a compass. But it's our choice, right? It's totally up to us. You know, let's put that in perspective, right? I can sit on the couch, popping pain pills, eating Cheetos, and feeling sorry for myself all day long because of what happened to me. Okay. Or because of what happened to me, I can go and try to teach other people how to be safer skydivers and how not to do what I did. Or I can talk to people that want to kill themselves because life sucks. And I could talk and say, hey, listen, it doesn't have to suck. You know, that's up to me though, right?
Mm.
So, and that's what I choose to do. Okay. And I'm not going to, you know, again, making money's great. It's a great thing. But you know what? And at the end of the day, it doesn't have any value. You're not taking it with you, and so it's a balance. I think you got to strike that balance. And you know, humility is a huge thing. I try to explain to people that the wolf is at the door. It's always there. So you know, bring yourself down a little bit. You know, this way when the wolf, excuse my language, when the wolf bites you in the ass, drags you down, because you're going to hit the bottom. You don't have that far to fall, you know, and then the recovery is not that hard because you don't have to climb all the way back up to the top. You know what I mean? Like, again, just being a little humble is not a bad thing. You know,
Yeah.
uh, it's and I also like nobody wanted to be skydiving, right? Again, they think they're looking out for you. They think that they're doing the right thing, but they're not. They want to protect you. I understand that, but you have to do what's going to help you. When you're in a situation like I was, right? You have to do what's going to help you to get on with your life, right? You have to close that book, right? And people said I couldn't skydive. They just said you can't do it. You're going to kill yourself. Um, I refused to listen, and I wouldn't let them get in my way. Right? Um, I was going to skydive one way or the other. Right? Um, and just because that's what my thing was, other people have other things. I don't care whatever it is. Just if you like to go hunting, don't just stop now because you know find a way to do it. You know, find someone that will help you get to the point where you can do it. I had a friend of mine, and he was in high school. He was riding a three wheeler. Um, he, they were unstable, very unstable back in the day. The three wheels as opposed to the four wheel quads. So he hit a rock and whatever, and he flipped, and he landed on a rock like the size of like a marble, but it hit his spine right. Look, he's paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. Now he didn't miss a beat, you know, like he was very good with his hands, and he put himself through architectural school by being a plumber. Okay, he was in a wheelchair. I mean, he was still a plumber. He built himself a water ski where he could ski, like and sit on the. It was amazing, right? And I just always remember how he didn't let it get in the way for him. So it's the same thing. Like I didn't listen to people trying to stop me. You know, you can't let somebody else decide your future, right? You got to choose your destiny and ignore anyone else that doesn't believe in your dreams. Because life has no guarantees. There's no guarantee. You know, so we got to take the chance. And if we fall, you get up and you try again. That's it. Um, is the two things that we do right that have a guaranteed outcome is like quitting and not trying, and your outcome is failure. You're guaranteed. That's the but everything else is a chance that you take. So that's how I live my life, and I want to try to tell people the same thing, like just go for it, man. Like Nike says there, right? Just do it, and just do it. Do something, you know.
Yeah.
Um, right behind me, there's a great quote by a great boxer Jack Dempsey. He says that a champion is someone who gets up when they can't. You know, and I tell people everybody can choose to be a champion. It's just a choice. What's the difference between the guy in the ring who's down that doesn't get up as opposed to the guy who does? You know, same situation, two different people. One will stay down and one will get up. It's a choice. It's just a choice. You have to get that mentality of, I'm getting up no matter what. I don't care. And there's so many different ways that we can prove ourselves when we find ourselves in a situation where you know we lose some mobility. We lose. I still have terrible feeling in my hands, right? And again, for me to get a screw, right, try to get, it'll take me, but I don't care if it takes me 10 minutes to get the screw in where I can screw something in. So what? Like just do it, So that's kind of where I am, I started speaking, about this whole situation, and I hope I could get to help people, uh, it's a crazy story. It's a long story, but it's it's all true, man. That's the thing. Like, and it's kind of wild, though. Like when I look back and I say, and I wouldn't change a thing. I would do it all over again. I don't care. Uh,
Yeah, it's definitely a story that needs to be told. There's so much there, and you definitely need to tell your story and continue to tell your story. I think it's
yeah,
so important.
I mean, I met a great person. Her name was Kim Beers. Um, she works for the Christopher Reeves Foundation, and so she travels, you know, giving speeches and everything. And like we, like most people don't realize what people go through who are completely, you know, disabled, paralyzed. Like I had no idea that, um, they are numb all over, but they still feel pain, right? And then trying to explain that to somebody, they'll sit there and argue with me. Well, if you're numb, you can't feel pain. That's not true. Nerve pain is different. Uh, and they feel that. So it's you know I tell people, like, look, when you see people in like wheelchairs, don't make believe they're not there, like they don't exist. Like, talk to them, say hello. They're normal people. Like it just that pisses me off. I got to tell you, I mean, I know I only had to experience that for a limited amount of time, but it left such an impression on me of how different we treat people in wheelchairs. It's amazing. It amazes me, and and I'm not going to say I'm innocent of it because I know that I'm probably not, but I know now that, man, that's just not cool, and
Yeah.
so you know so hopefully I get out there and spread my word, I guess, like,
Yes.
there's got to be a reason why I, number one, survived. You know, it's
Hmm.
not because of me. I didn't, nothing I did, right? I mean, um, so there has to be a reason, you know. Uh, so maybe that's it. Maybe I'll find peace doing that, and I'll stop jumping out of planes. That's
Or
that makes more
you can do
sense.
both. You can
Yeah,
do
or I could do both, right? Exactly.
yeah.
So it's
Oh, well, Gary, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It means the world. It's so important for everyone to hear, and I
well,
really appreciate it.
thank you for having me and then letting me tell it. I, I I I appreciate it. Because without the opportunity to tell it, it's just a story. You know, so at least if it can help somebody, and I think it can. And if not, it's still a good story. So we'll see. The first time I told it, I had never spoke in front of people before, right? I was terrified. It was, and I was like, I told my wife, I said, I'd rather have people shooting at me, than get up there and tell this story, and so I walked up to the stage, that long walk, everybody looking at you. Right. I laugh now because now I think it's hilarious, right? And and I was so worried that the words wouldn't come out, right? You know, and it's no different than having a conversation like we're having right now, right? And I started telling my story, and I realized as I'm talking, I said, and I thought, hey, there's actually words coming out of your mouth, you know? And I almost started laughing there right on stage because I realized, wow, this is easy, and then I really enjoyed it at that point, because I knew that the words were coming out, and it's how crazy. It's like what we again, it's what your mind can do to you if you let it, right? It can like really paralyze you, but when you get it under control, you can do anything you want. It's amazing that when you just like ignore it sometimes and just go do your thing. So. But I'm glad I got the first one out, and then I was after that it wasn't hard, and so But thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And and it's so important for people to feel validated and represented and like they exist.
Right, right. Because they do. And there's, like I said, I got hurt. I didn't get stupid. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like all of a sudden now, and then, but, you feel invisible too, though. Like, you actually feel like, yeah, I caught myself once thinking, like, do they not see me? You know what I mean? Like, it's, it's pretty crazy, though, And I don't think people do it on purpose. They don't. They just don't realize, you know? And that's, so, you got to also cut them a break too, though. But I just think we can do better. I think I know we can. You know. So
Well, thank you again for sharing your story and I appreciate it so much.
again, thank you.
Yeah, and I thank our listeners for joining us today. And I know you got so much out of Gary's story. And just remember that you do not have to suffer alone.
No, definitely not. And you know, you- I couldn't have accomplished anything without the people that care about me. You know, um, there's no way. So it's you have to lean on somebody or something. And to me, like, yeah, and I said, like, I don't go to church and I don't, but it, I realized very quickly that there's no atheists in a foxhole, right? You know that old saying? I realized what that meant right before I hit the fence, so, and I could not have gotten through it without that. I just, there's no way, no way. Gave me such confidence that I knew I was walking out of that hospital. You know, I didn't know how, but I knew that I was walking out. So it's important. So, but thank you again.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.